fear is very manipulative, very controlling, right? And I think, Kristin, I want to ask questions about your recovery process and how you eventually did heal, because I hear this word fear, and how I know you see the mind body connection in healing. But how did you move outside of the allopathic model, and how did you actually find a way for your body to fight this off? I think our bodies are designed to heal. How did you get everything in alignment to be able to do that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was a couple-year process. It started with like 3 or 4 months of antibiotics. And I was taking several antibiotics because I'd learned at that point that Lyme has multiple forms. And as soon as you throw doxycycline at it, which is kind of the first line agent that doctors will use if they're going to treat it, it rolls up. You'll kill some of it, but the smart ones roll up into hiding. They hide in what's called cyst forms or L forms, stationary forms, and they hang out in biofilm, which is the layers they create, all bugs create in our body to kind of live in community and share resources and avoid the immune system. And it can't be killed. Can't be killed. So I had done that for 3 months and I was progressively better. I mean, I was sleeping 12 hours a night. I had fevers all night, but I was working still. And after 3 months, felt better and stopped the antibiotics. 2 weeks later, my symptoms all came back, which I had been told they would, although I didn't really want to believe that, because you really have to do an overhaul of your immune system to help it join the fight. You can't just keep hammering it with antibiotics unless you want to be on that for life, which has its own downsides, right? In terms of the gut microbiome and all sorts of other things, mitochondria. And so I, at that point, had been learning some other things to do. So when it came back, I took a different tact. But I was still very, very ill. I mean, at that point, that was when I had the hospitalization, were intractable pain, and came home and was really, had lost 30 pounds. I was a mess and still not really getting out of bed without pain. I went to see a homeopathic family physician named Melinda Toney. She practiced in the Lehigh Valley for years and years. Many people knew her. I'd never met her before, but she was kind. And she offered to do like a session with me. So I sat with her and she listened to my story. And the way homeopathy works is, the doctor listens carefully for clues that might give insights into what remedy they need to use. And so she heard my whole story and she bustled off into her kitchen to whip up some homeopathy. She's like, "Oh, I know exactly what you need." So she's off making this little concoction for me. And I remember sitting on her couch in a blanket and just like shaking. And I just kept thinking, I feel like a shell. I feel like I've lost myself. I'm just a shell of who I was. And she comes back in and she says, "Take this homeopathy. Let me know how it goes and tell me how your pain is tomorrow." And I sort of laughed. I was like, my pain isn't even the worst of it. And this poor woman who'd already sat there for 2 hours sat back down and said, "Tell me what the worst of it is." And what I hadn't told her was that I had been, in my bed for 5 weeks, had come down one night for dinner. And my husband, Greg, said, "Look, Mommy's downstairs for dinner. Yay." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "What are you talking about? You haven't been downstairs for a meal in 5 weeks. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, you guys must have thought I was upstairs dying in my bed, right? Did you think Mom was dying? Kind of making a joke of it. And they all kind of nodded and said, "Yeah." And I said, "No,
Wow.
who really thought I was dying?" And they all looked down at their plates and put their hands up. And I was like, oh my gosh, my kids thought I was dying. And I'm 42, which is how old my mom was when she died and left 4 kids behind. And I remembered in that moment that I'd always sort of imagined I would die at 42 and leave 4 kids behind, And then, of course, I had kids of my own. And I was like, well, clearly, I'm not going to make that choice. Like, that's not my life. That was a random fluke cancer. That's not going to take me. But suddenly I realized, wow, I'd done it. Like, I'd done it. And I said to her, the worst is I feel like I'm dying. Like, I feel like I have to will myself to take a breath, that I have to talk my body into being alive every moment. And she goes, your mother died at 42, but that was her path. This is your path. She made her choice and you can make your choice. And your choice makes every bit of difference in terms of how I support you on your path. So text me tomorrow and let me know what your choice is. And that blew my mind a little bit. I got in the car because I wasn't driving. I couldn't drive. I was on, fentanyl patch for pain. And my husband was like, how'd it go? And I told him that. And he said, oh, well, do me a favor and text me as well. I was like, oh my God, you poor man. You've like been holding it all together for months and months. And you also are experiencing me dying. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So I got into bed that night and I remember lying there going, how do you make a choice like that? I said, well, how do I make any choice? I imagine myself on a path. I feel the feelings that come up. And I know once I feel the feelings what the right choice is for me. So I imagined myself dying and nothing came up, no feelings. I was like, yeah, it's already happened. Like your work has gone on without you. They've found replacements for you at work. They're getting the job done. Your husband's taken over. Your kids are fine. Like I'll die. Greg will get a new wife. Everyone will be happy. It would actually be okay. Like no emotion. I say that now and I have emotion, but I'm like, I had no emotion. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Or I could live. And again, I had no emotion, but I had this blast of awareness that said, yeah, but if you're alive, there's going to be only living for love and bliss and saving the planet, jumping on trampolines with your daughter and your sons. Like there's not going to be any fear of what kind of doctor you're becoming or any kind of like fear about practicing medicine in a way that's outside the box. Like you're only going to live for the good stuff. And I was like, huh, that's powerful and interesting. I still didn't know my choices. So I went to bed. Woke up in the morning, had the same conversation, no clarity. But the next thing that happened is I got out of my bed. And the next thing I know, I was like bouncing around the streets on the Lanta bus on my way to physical therapy. And I was like, that's interesting. Got to physical therapy, came home, and then found myself in the garden. Like literally, I woke, I was like, my eyes open. I'm like, oh, here I am sitting in my garden. Wow, the red bud is blooming. Wow, it's spring. I better text Melinda. So I text her and I said, look, I don't really know what's going on here. All I know is I've gotten up and had breakfast downstairs. I went to physical therapy and now I'm sitting in my garden. I feel like maybe I'm choosing life. And she was like, woohoo, good job. Keep me posted. Continue to, stay the course. And I can't, and that night when I went to bed, I got into my bed and I was like, wow, hi, stranger. I've been cheating on you all day with living without really knowing it. I mean, I can't say that it was intentional. My body was like walking me through the steps of living. And it just continued to do that for months without like, me making it. So it's hard to say that because I'd been used to feeling like I'm in control of my story. I'm in control of my choices. I'm making these intentions and following them. No, I was following along as my body like took steps towards being alive. And it took a couple years for me to really feel back in my body. And there was other stuff, I used a bunch of herbs. I used chlorine dioxide, all that stuff. I think wouldn't have done anything without me really getting clear on my choice first.
That's powerful. Do you believe coincidence exists?
Depends on what you mean by coincidence.
So was there some divine intervention for you to meet this homeopath and to get that message?
I think every bit of the story was divine intervention. I think the whole thing was a total gift and was part of my soul's path. I think I probably set it up with my guides and elders prior to coming here. And we were like, look, there's going to be this crazy experience, which is going to shake you to your core. You're going to want to die and you're not going to die because you're going to choose to live. And when you become who you become, you'll look back and you'll realize that all this was part of it.
You want to know something that's fascinating? I have this one client that I'm struggling with, meditating, trying to kind of get the answers, which generally come to me in meditation. And I had this incredible feeling that the answers were about to come. In fact, I was even telling Sean before this podcast, I had this incredible lift in mood and energy that I've been experiencing. And your story is the solution. It's the answer that I need to be able to provide this client. And I know it in my heart. And listening to you talk about that experience with the homeopath and what she said to you gave me tingles and a feeling of energy from my head down to my toes in a way that I can't even begin to explain.
You scooted back in your chair. Saw you.
And I know exactly what I have to say now.
Beautiful.
And these are the things that, I've certainly been experiencing, that when we have a shift in consciousness, when we expand our consciousness, and we move beyond what we know in this physical reality, that you realize how self-limiting our minds are, and that we are divine souls with an incredible purpose. But so many people are still asleep. They don't know it. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they're capable of. And we have limited ourselves in our ability to heal ourselves physically, heal ourselves emotionally, but also heal through our experiences, through our energy, our presence, through love. We have this whole self-limiting idea of what reality is that has been, in my opinion, sold to us. And an awakening for me is an expansion of consciousness about increasing awareness of what else does exist, about other possibilities.